Welcome, I'm Michael Bickert. Thanks for joining me today as we explore concepts with the objective of improving your management skills and growing your business. Have you got a pen? Have you got a notepad? If not, pause the video and grab those. You're gonna need them. I want you to take notes and I want you to jot down some sort of action item that you will implement in your business today. That's what it's all about. Make progress each and every day. So let's do something today to move your business forward. Today we're going to cover some familiar ground. If you've been following me, then this topic is one that we've covered in the past, maybe 3 times, but it's so imperative, it's so important, and it's come up again with a leader in my organization, and I had to clarify some points, which led me to the conclusion that there's still some outstanding things that either I glazed over, I didn't emphasize enough, or I maybe didn't cover entirely. So you'll forgive me if some of the content herein is repeat to you, but it's just so important. And what I'm talking about is putting first things first. Time management, prioritization, the tyranny of the urgent, and all the concepts that surround that. I'm gonna try and hit on a couple of points that maybe I didn't make as clear before. This is something that's so important. In fact, what I said to the individual I was speaking with is I said, I don't want you to do anything else until we've got this covered. And what I meant was, until you've got a mental framework for how to manage this, for how to put first things first in your management of your day, and in the management of your time, in your prioritization. You've got to come up with a framework, or as I told them, a formula, an algorithm that makes sense, a base set of rules that you will follow each and every time without fail, that you come back to every time you're not sure what you should do. In other words, if you watching this video right now are not sure exactly what the most important things that you need to do today are, then you lack that framework. You are lacking that formula and that algorithm. And that is what I'm saying to you, as I said to him, is the most important thing. Drop everything else. And I cited some of the most important things in our priorities and in our organization. And I said, don't do anything on this or that or the other. Just drop everything until you can wrap your head around this. And yet still, we had to revisit the concept. It is very difficult, and it's because of habits. Habits are so ingrained in us. I mean, that's what a habit is. But they're so prevalent. That is, they are so pressing. I'm not sure what the adjective I'm looking for is. Help me out here. Basically, they are encumbering. They force you to fall into the same groove day after day after day. I mean, I'm just describing a habit, but they're so powerful, I guess, is a simple way to word it. They're so powerful in making you and magnetic, drawing you back to them time and again. So when you're trying to break habits, when you're trying to form new habits, better habits, become more effective, it's really critical to not just move on. Once you think you put in, that college try, a good effort, and you've made a little bit of progress, now we can move on. Of course, that's good. Any progress is good. And we don't look at things as binary, like they're either fixed or not fixed. And we want to make progress along our path to improvement and becoming more effective. Yet what I mean is don't stop. And be conscious of the fact that things will regress, things will go backwards. That's precisely why I've given the advice in the past that you need to schedule these videos, the most important ones, and rewatch them 2, 3, 4 times a year. Maybe you need to watch some of them monthly, depending on how relevant they are to changing your behavior and how important they are in your path to becoming more effective. And I gotta tell you, this is one of those things, maybe it's boring. Maybe some of you are like, I just don't get it. Time management, prioritization, it's boring. Maybe so, but it is, I think, the most important thing. So I wasn't exaggerating when I said that you shouldn't do anything else until you've got your head around this one. Until you solve this problem, you're going to be ineffective continuously. It's just going to plague you for a very long time. Now, I don't mean drop everything and don't ever do anything else until you're perfect. What I mean to say is drop everything, prioritize this, and work on it every single day until you have mastered this habit, this effective means of putting first things first. So let's just review some of the concepts we've talked about before. How many things can you do in a day? Really, what I want you to focus on is 2 things. You will do 2 things every day. So you want to have a place where those things, so everything that you should be doing and you wish to do over time, we've talked about, you create a parking lot, some place where you just keep on adding more and more items that are things that need to be done. And in some way you quantify those things in terms of their importance and their urgency. So maybe you assign deadlines to them. If they're not important, they don't go on your list. That's the other review. Anything that's not important doesn't go on your list. Okay, you can leave that for other people to do, or you can leave those things to never be done, hopefully, but maybe they're done when it doesn't matter. It's like just you're killing time, so to speak. Then you can do non-important things. But really, as a manager, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, it's so critical. You only have a finite amount of time. Therefore, all of that time needs to be spent on doing things which are important. And so we have this list, and we use a mechanism through which we can see which things rise to the top based on importance. And then our top 2 things are what we're working on that day, and that's it. Now, this is the first place I had to add clarification for this particular individual, which is I don't literally mean you cannot work on anything that isn't those top 2 things. And I said I'm going to use an extreme example, and I don't mean to be disrespectful by giving such a silly example, but I want to make the point. I said breathing isn't on your list, and that's really, really important. You need to breathe. And I said, there are other things on your list, like maybe turning on your computer isn't on your list, but you maybe can't do anything else on your list without your computer turned on, and it's not on there. So you can understand intuitively that I don't mean literally you don't do anything but 2 things in a day. What I mean is the most important 2 things on your list you are going to work on today, even if it means there is nothing else that's on your list that will be worked on today. And the response I got was, okay, so where do you draw the line though? How far up that spectrum from the ridiculous of breathing or turning on your computer, how far up the list do you go when you go, okay, well now, no, I do mean you can't work on that because you're working on the other 2 things. So I'm gonna tell you my response to that and clarify that. I just want to back up a second here and remind you, you only are going to focus on things that are important, and you're only gonna focus on 2 things because there's only so much time. Then, just in terms of my response on that, I'm saying that you can work on other things on your list once you have put in sufficient effort and productivity on those 2 things. Now this is subjective, and you'll have to determine for yourself. So I'm going to tell you that the amount of hours that you work in a day, and the amount of hours that we're sort of expected to work by societal norms is, I think, very arbitrary. It might be based on something, but a 40-hour work week or 8 hours per day as examples, those are somewhat arbitrary. And more importantly, I would say to you, those are excessive. There is no way that you can be, as a manager, as a very effective entrepreneur, there's no way you can be at the top of your game for 40 hours in a week. Now, you might say to me, Michael, I work 70 hours a week. I would say to you, you're active for 70 hours a week in what you define as work, but you're not working in terms of high level productivity, effectiveness in the way that I'm describing. That is to be in the zone, if you'll forgive the expression, to have that flow where you're really making progress, you're really effective, and you're really productive. You've all felt that way at one time or another. Think back to that. Try to, in your mind's eye or in your feeling, try to feel that right now. you know what it's like at the end of the day where it's like, wow, I just really got something. Maybe it was some writing you were doing, or I'm not sure what it was. Something creative, you designed something, you built something. I'm not sure what it is, but try to think as an example in your life when you've been working on something and it was just going really, really well. It was like the ideas were flowing, or you could do no wrong. Everything was going tickety-boo, so to speak. And that's what I mean, that feeling of really getting, as long as you're working on important things and you're getting that feeling, that's what I'm talking about, that it's impossible to go for sort of societal norms of 70-hour work weeks or 40-hour work week or 8-hour day. Now, it is individual dependent and it depends on the type of work you're doing, but that really important, effective, productive work is draining. And maybe it's not even physical at all, but it's mentally draining. And I've often said most of your work should be done between the ears. You're a thinker. In management, we're thinking, we're problem solving, and we're innovating. We're adding value to the business. That's mostly born of your neurons inside your skull. So it can be very draining, and you can be exhausting. It can be exhausting. You could be exhausted at the end of a really productive session of whatever that means, that kind of work. I would guess, this is somewhat arbitrary, or rather it's based on personal experience. I would say you probably only have between 2 to 4 hours per day in which you can put out at a reasonably high level. Now, the higher the level you put out at, I would say there's an inverse relationship. There's less time that you can spend on that. So you're gonna do 2 things. They're only gonna be important things, the most important things from your list, and you're gonna work on them for how long? However long you can work on them with your own self-evaluation of being highly productive. Now, from one individual to another, when you're productive, at what time in the day may differ. For me, the first part of the day, and that might differ again from one to another. When does your day start? I think Jeff Bezos had remarked in one interview that he likes to spend some family time in the morning, get a good breakfast, and he arrives at the office, which might seem later than normal for some people. And I think he books that first meeting somewhere around 10 a.m. It might have been 9 a.m. or 10 a.m., but that's the first meeting, that's where he's most productive. I'm similar, I would go a little bit earlier. I like to start my day a little bit earlier than that, but first thing is when I want to do those most important things. I would recommend to you, of course, it's going to be first thing for you as well, but your day might be structured differently. You might be a night owl, and you might start your most productive part of the day at 5 p.m., where a lot of people traditionally are winding down. It might be for you that, no, that's where I get my best work done. So I want you to evaluate that, and then let's make that the start of your workday, or at least by our definition of your workday. And then schedule those most important things for that time of the day when you do your best work, and focus on those 2 things only. Now, I gave the example of, I think you can only spend, depending on how high level of output you're giving, how exhausting this is going to be, you can only put in probably 2 to 4 hours. Well, you may have dedicated in your schedule, well, I can put in 8 hours today, or whatever it is, 6 hours or 10 hours or whatever. Those other things that are on your list can now be worked on beyond the 2. Now you can move on to some of those other things. And this is a really important concept that I described when I was giving advice on this. As soon as you recognize you're not in the zone, you're not being productive, you're working on those 2 most important things, and you being honest with yourself, you're like, it's just not working. And think back to when you were in school, maybe you were writing an essay, some kind of paper or whatever, you sat down, the words were not flowing, you had writer's block or whatever, and it just wasn't happening. I recommend you stop. Don't work on that anymore. Be honest with yourself. That's not violating these rules that we're talking about for being effective. The problem isn't that a person once in a while can't be in the zone. The problem is that people don't focus on this structure and this sort of way, this discipline of handling their schedule every day. And therefore, those most important things are always postponed. And people, the tyranny of the urgent is people working on things that are urgent and not as important or not important as at all. But to the degree that you actually put in an honest effort on those important things and you are sort of stalling, your productivity runs out a little bit, that's fine. Then move on to something lower on your list. And it's also okay to take some things lower on the list, some things that maybe will motivate you because you get them done, and you'll get the motivation from the action and the activity of getting things done. Anything on your list has some degree of importance. If it doesn't, it shouldn't be on your list. And so work on some other things maybe that you can just check off and everything. And it's fine if you have a whole day like that where it's like, today I just need to do a little bit of mindless stuff, but these are things I need to do and I can just sort of plow through them. They're not as important, but they've got to get done and they're on my list. No problem. Get those things done. That will often provide you a little bit of fuel where you feel good. Okay, some of the clutter I've cleared up some things, I've checked them off my list. Now I'm going to get back to the important thing. But be careful. You've got to be honest with yourself. Don't trick yourself into doing that. If that is the rule, not the exception, you are not following this framework that I'm suggesting that you need to get down. Ordinarily, every single day, you have to put in that amount of effort to where you can look yourself in the mirror and say, you know what, I feel good about that. I plowed through some, I got a good chunk. I'm eating the elephant one bite at a time. I got a good chunk of that out of the way. And through discipline, you're doing that, you're going to get these big things implemented and accomplished. So that's what we're talking about here. It's also okay to do things that are not on your list and they're personal. I say to my team, look, you have my full permission and you can count it as work, billable hours, so to speak, if you have put in the most productive time and you can honestly say, no, I plowed through some stuff. I got some very creative, highly creative and highly productive work done. And now I just need to chill. I'm gonna catch up on some reading, even if it's personal reading. Why I think that's important, and I hope you'll embrace this. This might be a little controversial for some of you who run a business and you think, no, that person who's putting in 40 hours for me this week, I need all 40 of their hours. You're kidding yourself. You're fooling yourself when you say that, because all they're doing is hiding from you those periods where they're unproductive. So why don't you have an open culture where it's like, it's not about constantly being productive. It's about making sure our most important things are done. They're done first. And then when you are done those things, look for other things, and hopefully they help the business. But if they don't, and it's really about recharging, that's cool too. That's in fact highly recommended. And with your top people in your organization, your managers, I would highly recommend that you not only give them permission to do this, but insist upon it. Tell them, hey, when your brain is just not working, try to find areas of inspiration and ways to recharge. I gave the example of a nap. I don't actually think a nap is probably that effective, but I wouldn't be averse to it if somebody needed that. If somebody, for whatever reason didn't get enough sleep and they just needed to recharge literally through, they literally needed to do some sleeping to get their energy back, then fine. It's kind of like, think of it in physical terms. If a person is physically incapable of doing the work that's required, they need to rest, they need to sit down. We understand that, but when it comes to mental work, which is so much of what you should be focused on, why do we think we have the limitless capacity to just keep on plowing through? That's not how the brain works. That's not reality. It's not realistic. So remember and tell your people, share this video with your people and say, it's okay once you can look yourself in the mirror and you say, you know what, I really did some great work today. If you then want to wind down with some other stuff, it's still okay. It's like, go ahead and do that as long as we focus on getting those most important things done. And on those days where, boy, I'm just not into it, my brain's not working today or whatever, and it would maybe be a liability to work on something so important, as long as you're being honest with yourself, then don't do that. Then work on something further down the list. That's how this works. Now, a question came up on this about, okay, what happens when someone else in my organization puts demands on my time and it's the top 2 important things on their list and they need my involvement? All right, well, that's a great question. And the answer is this: your day gets scheduled according to your list, not anyone else's list. And so even though there may be somebody else in your organization who really relies on you and needs your input to get something done, then you would say, well, isn't that a contradiction? Remember, as Ayn Rand says, there are no contradictions. When there's an apparent contradiction, check your premises. You'll find one of them is wrong. And the premise that I need to dedicate a specific time to other people to help them do things on the top 2 on their list because it's my organization, because they work for me, or whatever, is the flawed premise. I will make time for them eventually. But as we say in the video about your lack of preparation does not constitute an emergency on my part, and as we point out in the video on your 4 obligations, you can really define things and schedule things so that you are only focused on those things most important on your list, and where they overlap, when now the most important stuff on your list and or what you allow for also overlaps with other people, great. So maybe I didn't articulate that very well. So the example I gave is, you got to step back and sort of think about it and solve that problem. Remember, it's really just a scheduling problem we're talking about here. So in my example of 2 hours or 4 hours, and maybe the person's going to put in 8 hours, and there are some other hours in the day to dedicate to these other people's needs. And when we were playing devil's advocate in the communication, it came back to me, well, what if that doesn't work for their schedule? They need it during my most productive time. I then said no. The answer is no. But you can, once per month or once per week or whatever your particular situation necessitates, you can then schedule and say, okay, here's when I will make myself available to you. And you ask those people to, because the items should not be urgent, important, but not urgent. Maybe they have some deadlines, but they need to be approaching you in advance and scheduling that stuff. So they're putting it into an agenda item so they can meet with you. Maybe it's next week or even once per month or whatever. And that's how you effectively tackle those things. Now, some of you are probably thinking this is unrealistic based on the pace within your work environment, and it has to adjust according to the individual that's looking at this video and considering how their day works and everything. But I'm telling you, if you allow other people to determine what goes on into your most productive time, where you should be working on those 2 things, it's broken. The whole system will not work. Turn off the video, scrap this, and stop following my advice if you think that's going to work. It will not work. I can tell you from experience, personal experience, and managing many, many people throughout the years. As long as you allow other people to put demands on your time, and that displaces time that should be dedicated to the most important things you need to get done, then that's almost the definition of the tyranny of the urgent. So much of the urgency that you're experiencing out there, and the tyranny of the urgent, is sort of the definition is when you allow a task's urgency to trick you into thinking it's important, but it isn't necessarily important. And what I was saying a moment ago is we're following your definitions on your list of what's important to you. If further down the list, there's like, well, I need to meet my obligations as a manager to my people, my 4 obligations, including giving them the necessary resources, training and tools that they need, clarifying my expectations, no problem. Extending deadlines for them. They might be needing to meet with you to request the deadline. There should be mechanisms for them to do that. Regular, scheduled, recurring meetings, or some sort of database, asynchronous communication where you can be alerted, and maybe now you schedule in, at these less effective times in my day. What I mean to say is those times where I'm not as productive, this is when I check those tools and I check for notifications and incoming requests, and I review an agenda for a meeting that's coming up in the future, that kind of thing. As I've said before, you will explain to your people, and you can use these words. You say, you need me to be working on the stuff I'm working on right now. I'm sorry I can't drop what I'm doing to help you. I know you say you just need a minute, or you only need me for 20 minutes or whatever, but I'm sorry. I'm not available. Every time you make an exception on that rule, you're allowing that habit to come back. Almost like, I don't mean to treat addiction lightly, but an addict who is like, oh, I can just have one drink, or I can just, it's a slippery slope. Every time you allow the bad habit, any grip to come back into your life, you are risking sliding all the way back to the start and ruining all the progress you've made. So try to be strict about not making those exceptions. The exceptions you can make are for yourself, not for others. This is about boundaries, and some people lack boundaries and will put demands on your time no matter how many times you ask them not to. Eventually, as you administer consequences for them breaking your boundaries, they will learn and they will adapt their behavior, hopefully. You can't control other people. You can control yourself. This whole concept is about being able to look yourself in the mirror and be confident that, yes, I'm working on that which is most important, and I'm following this framework, this algorithm, this formula. Every day, I always work on those things first. And once I am sort of petering out, so to speak, I'm running out of energy, the mental energy to do the most important things, I can move down the list to those things that don't require quite as much of me if I'm still going to put in some time. Or I can recharge doing something way down the list. Like, well, there's some books that are on my bucket list that I'd like to read. And there may be some inspirational video I want to watch, like this one. Okay, that's where I want to leave it for today. We've covered this ground a few times before. We'll make a playlist of this, and I really encourage you to continue to watch these from time to time, and then do an introspection and ask yourself, do I have control of my day? Am I making real progress? You can look to things like, what kind of innovation is going on in your business? How much progress are you making? Is your business on the right track? If not, those higher level questions are probably symptomatic of something going on with your day and your inability to be effective with your schedule. So come back to this. Make a commitment to yourself that you will make some progress. You're going to have to reflect. You're going to have to communicate with your team and share with them so that they're not shocked when you are putting yourself ahead of them. Make a commitment and encourage everyone else to do this. That's where I'm going to leave it for today. Please leave some comments so that I know if have you heard enough of this? Do you need more? Do you need more clarification? I'm going to keep harping on this as long as I witness it as a problem, and I think this is probably the prevailing problem for most managers, so it's so critical. Leave a comment that we can all learn from, because we need to learn from one another. Perpetual refinement.